So we will go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Change Management, Getting Results in the Public Sector. We're very excited to have you here today. And I want to first thank our guests, Rowena and Tom, for being part of today's session. So as many of you know, Avaap is an industry-focused technology and management consulting firm. Our market-leading change management practice is powered by ProSci research, data, and concepts. And with offices around the US and the world, we have deep expertise in education, government, healthcare, and manufacturing, among other industries. So today we're super excited for the session. Avaap's own Michael Sponauer will be facilitating the discussion. Michael is a director of consulting services with Avaap, and he joined the company in 2018 after a career in public service, communications, and journalism. He is a certified change management professional and holds degrees from Ohio State and the University of South Carolina. So before I hand it over to Michael, I want to encourage everyone to submit questions for our panelists throughout the session, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. And I also want to mention that everyone who registered for today's webinar will receive a recording of the session. All right, let's get started, Michael.
Thank you, Vanessa, and welcome everyone. Let me introduce our guests. Tom Nurka is Director of Financial Systems at the City of Columbus, where he has led the successful delivery of many large-scale technology solutions during his 25-year career. His efforts include a strong focus on ensuring success for the city's 10,000 employees, business partners, and the community. Tom is a graduate of Ohio State and resides in Northwest Columbus with his wife and daughter. Also with us today is Rowena Barcelona-Nuki, who is Chief Deputy of the SAP Center of Excellence for the County of San Bernardino in California. She leads the implementation of financial system solutions for all departments at the county and works with their business process owners, end users, and IT to support their needs. She earned a BA in economics from the University of Southern California and an MBA from the University of Phoenix. She previously worked for the Walt Disney Company, Nestle, and the Penhall Company. So thank you both for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Tom, let me start with you. You've worked on a lot of projects and seen a lot during your career with the city. Tell us a little bit about what you have learned along that journey and how you've come to put an emphasis on change management.
Well, as you said, I've been with the city for 25 years, and even before that, wherever I worked, there was always some sort of new system going in, and so the gray beard here belies the amount of experience about how things have changed over the years. Many of the original implementations, whether I worked on them as a super user or when I moved to technology, in the late 90s. It was more of a top-down approach. You would gather, key decision makers. You would get some folks together in a room. You'd make all the decisions, and then test your design and everything. And then right at the end users and most of the people, they'd come in and just get some last-minute training before you went live. And our thought back then was, if we gave them enough instructions, cheat sheets, and things like that, they would do whatever it is that is needed and what they were told. And that worked to an extent, if the employees, if all they did was, mostly data entry, and you didn't really need any reasoning or thought put behind, what was happening in the system. But really, the way that things have, evolved, the systems and processes have increased as well as like the employee responsibilities. So much of the routine entry today is like automated, so now you rely on your employees' interaction to have a more of a value added role, right? So, processes are more complex, and, thinking and decision is often required before you do that data entry. And, you can't capture every possible scenario in your documentation, or if you do, it's a lengthy novel that's nobody is going to read. So now when we start a project, we really have to evaluate how much of the actual rollout success is based on not just of the select few knowing what to put in the system, but how well will the users, adopt the new system.
Great. Tell me a little more about the two big projects you have been working on there most recently.
So we've been going through a fairly a large modernization effort in the city auditor's office. We've had two really big projects, and Gluttons for Punishment. We did them at the same time, but we did a total update of our payroll systems, and then we also did a Microsoft Dynamics 365 deployment to update our financial and purchasing systems. For the payroll project, that touched every single employee at some level. And it was more than just payroll. It was payroll, personnel, benefits administration, onboarding, employee self-service, quite a few things that we added. And so that was a true modernization and digital transformation effort. But the issue of it really wasn't that we had to convince anybody that our 38-year-old legacy system needed to be replaced, or that our disjointed timekeeping systems needed to be, aggregated. It was really a matter of convincing people that this is the project that was going to succeed, because we had previous efforts in the past that we did not get them over the finish line. And the Dynamics 365 was a little bit different because it involved a smaller group of people within the city, fiscal and purchasing managers, but it also impacted like thousands of business owners that sell goods and services to the city. And we launched a new vendor portal for them as well. And so for us, the big question was, how well are we reaching these audiences in both these things? And that's kind of where change management comes in.
Well, thank you for setting up my next question. Obviously, that's how we came to work together, was you baked change management into these projects from the outset. Talk a little more about how you came to that decision and what specifically you were looking for in putting that into the projects from the get-go.
Yeah, I think the big question for us was, you put in a communication plan, you put in training plans, you do these types of things, but how do we really know that, we're reaching these folks? Are they really feeling, ready? How do they feel about it? What needs do they have that we didn't consider? Training is a component, but communication and, early exposure to the products and processes actually kind of help them get acclimated to what's going to be happening. And so we're looking to get the insights from the people that actually are going to, use the system regularly to make sure that, we don't have gaps. And so we approached it from the idea that, our briefings aren't just for the C-level folks, but they're keeping all the key stakeholders up to date. What's in it for them, right? All change boils down to is, what is happening? What are you going to do to me, and what's in it for me, right? So we've tried to use the change management process as a way to build excitement and also kind of stave off any kind of runaway rumors, throughout the organization.
Right. And so were there specific things in the change management toolkit that you thought were most valuable to you as someone leading a project and, working in an organization that has offices all around a very large metropolitan area?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, communication and identifying all the people that we wanted to talk with and make sure that we were sharing information, whether it was our vendors, whether it was our external third-party benefits providers, whether it was our rank and file employees, whether it was the back office users we were going to depend on getting payroll right every other week. We ended up spending a lot of our time, talking and meeting with folks. And, the one thing is, we always talk about communication. We need to communicate better, and we need to, train people. But to me, change management was always kind of a squishy thing, and it was something that wasn't, necessarily measurable. And so we decided that we were going to try to put a little science behind the transaction. So that's where Avaap came in for us. Is they had actually, come in and were part of a different project and a different pitch team, but their change management approach resonated with me, and I decided that I was going to try it, first in the Payforce and Dayforce implementation. And so they had kind of actual approaches, the industry approaches like for ProSci, which uses this ad cart concept, making people aware of the change and all these different things to move them from the awareness to kind of the readiness stage. And so that gave us measurables, so we wanted to make sure that, I'm putting this stuff out here. I'm using all this omni-channel approach to communicate with all these different stakeholders, but are they getting the message? And then what are their concerns that are coming back to us that we're not messaging correctly or that we need to address? And so that gave us just a really good sense of where we were in the project and how people were responding to our change. And we were able to take those measurables and start, you start out with kind of a red light, everything's, red. And then, we list out the things that we're going to do. And then as we execute them, and then we survey the folks to see how well that they're getting the message. We're able to consolidate that, put that together, put it in some sort of data and metrics, right? That we could take that back to our sponsors, and we could say, this is what the communication plan looks like. We're moving from red to yellow. We're moving to yellow to green. These are the things these are activities that we're doing, we're planning in the next month, or, to make sure that our message is getting out there and the outreach is getting through.
Great, thank you. One last question for the opener here. Union workforce is a very significant element of the city of Columbus, and a number of different contracts specify how the employee-employer relationship is managed there. How does that impact project deployment, and how does change management help with that, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, we have collective bargaining unit agreements, and so we have unions. We have items that are set by ordinances. We have state law that dictates what some of the elected officials or judges make. So those types of collective bargaining kind of things, are key to implementing things where you're evaluating people's time, or accumulating benefits or leave entitlements. Also within all these types of agreements or things, there's some discretionary value that's given to the department directors. They have their own fiefdoms, right? So there's inconsistent practices that, it's great for operations when they have that flexibility. It's very bad for standardization when you're trying to apply, the same rules to the same group of people. And I'd probably say the other kind of challenge is, when you're doing this kind of modern solution, you're no longer static, where things don't change very often, right? You're constantly changing, you're constantly evolving, so getting people to change their mindset that things are going to be, be following some sort of continuous improvement process. There's going to be new releases, and that we need them to be more than just a consumer. We need them to be a contributor, right? So if you think about like the bargaining unit agreements, probably if you think about like an 80-20 rule, 80% of the rules and policies affecting our calculations, they were done quickly, in 20% of the time. The bulk of the work in our testing had to go around all the different exceptions. And so, it was maddening sometimes where, we were spending a lot of time on, groups of 20 people in a place that has 10,000 plus employees, and so the bulk of our work was for all these exceptions, the agreements aren't always logical, or they ignore basic principles of math, right? So an example would be like, we've got a union dues deduction where the agreement was we would change from a monthly, and the labor relations agreed to make it so that they would have it twice a month. But the union dues were $22.52, not divisible by 2. So instead of just having to do a simple deduction and change the frequency to, first and second pay period, we ended up having to create 2 deductions, one that ended in, 8 cents and one that ended in 7 cents, so that the math came together, right? Extra work, extra complexity for very little value, right? There's special memorandums of agreements where, we had overtime rules for one job class and one department for less than 10 people. We had to write special rules for them. We had a group of people that half the year, less than 30 people, they had shifts that when the holiday fell, it fell before the holiday because they worked holidays. And then the second half of the year, it fell after the holidays. So we had to make special holidays, special holiday groups, for 30 people, 27 actually. So, there's just special carve outs. And, the unions were one of our stakeholders. And so we used our change management. We were tracking things in the change log, and we wanted to make sure with the unions that, we were telling them what's in it for the employees. We're not doing this in some way to harm the employees. We're actually trying to improve their situation with us. Most of the new workers that come to the city of Columbus are expecting us to have more of a modern system, right? They've come from places that had onboarding or self-service, so we tried to show them we're gonna have mobile apps, where they're gonna be able to do things instead of on paper, online. They'll be able to do more things. And I didn't want to get caught into that, that normal union friction between management and, the union leadership. So, I was really trying to stress that, the guidance I got from our executive sponsor and the elected auditor and the elected mayor was that whenever it came down to things, if I had to make a decision in the course of the project, rounding from something to the, that always favor the employee, the tie goes to the runner, and trying to, stress that we're really not trying to hurt anybody here. We're actually just trying to improve everybody's lot.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Let's turn down now to Rowena. You came to the county in 2017.
2018.
I'm sorry, 2018. But before you got there, there'd been a major project. Tell me what happened with that and how that influenced your work.
So the County of San Bernardino also replaced a very old financial systems, homegrown, 26 years old, black and green screen type thing. And so they implemented an SAP ERP system, which is very different than just a financial accounting system. They actually invested in a enterprise resource planning system that was more than just financials. So we implemented, from procurement, from treasury, and so forth. And one of the biggest things is they went live. The county went live in October 2017. I was hired and onboarded on April 2018, and what I received when I started was a lot of angry end users, angry managers, angry department, heads, where the first thing I was tasked to do was meet with all these elected officials, from the sheriff to, regional medical centers, to just, so they could express their displeasure, their anger of the implementation, because the project did not concentrate on change management. And we knew, coming from a gigantic company like Disney and Nestle, that was expected. When the focus is on, the actual system and, and business process change, they didn't realize and emphasize the impact to the end users, as Tom was mentioning earlier. At the end of the day, who's impacted the change? And that's your end users. So it was tasked, our consultants were tasked to provide training, but the training was really on how the system works, but now how it impacts the business within the county. So understanding that was a painful process, it took me and the team that I, developed or created to support the SAP system almost a year to get everybody finally happy with how the system works. And the biggest complaint was end user training was not done well. They didn't learn anything. And so they were still learning, utilizing the system. So we focus more on the back half of change management. So change management is not just the beginning of a big project. Change management is across the board, even after your system is already up and running. You still have to be able to really refine your communication strategy. You have to be able to, really get, the users that really enjoyed the change, bring them together and create a super user type, team that will then be your partner who would collaborate going forward in regards to any new change management that you're going to implement in the future.
So talking a little bit more about training, obviously just one component of OCM, but when you arrived and had all of this displeasure greeting you as you came through the door, what type of training had they received, and what are you doing now differently to better fill that gap?
So the training that was provided before the go live was really There were actually hands-on training where we had instructors that were instructor-led. Unfortunately, the scripts of those instructions were really how SAP works, but not how the County of San Bernardino was going to use SAP. So it really did not train a user of regards to, like, we implemented our procurement process. It didn't teach them why we went from the old way to the new way. So that was the disconnect. People were still trying to, because they weren't trained well, they were really fighting the change. So they kept continuing to use paper, to think that paper is going to, make it faster, and actually it made it slower. So as Tom mentioned earlier about educating the actual users, not just the C level, of how the system works for the end user is so key. And so now what we've done is, we are putting a lot more of video type of training on our website that we've created for all end users, that actually walks them, step by step of, how to go through the system, and also provides them a education of what it does. And if you do it this way, this is the impact, instead of just as like, it's no longer robotic. It's no longer, a data entry, as Tom mentioned. It's when people say that you're implementing a system, and your system you're implementing is so complex. It's complex because you're not educating the user of how this system will work and how it impacts them at the end of the day, and what the end result is.
Right.
So.
Tom had kind of touched on this earlier, and I didn't know what your perspective was. During your career, are you seeing the expectations that people bring to the table when there's something changing increasing? Do people just have higher expectations for what the employer is going to do to prepare them for something like this?
The what I've experienced coming from a private industry to public, because my career has been the private industry. I mean, I've only been in the public sector going on 3 years now. Um, is that, as Tom mentioned about, implementing best practices. So difficult to implement best practices in public sector, because there's so many chiefdoms, as you mentioned, different departments that do it their way, in certain ways, even though the overall goal is to really streamline the process and help their end users. And as we get brand new employees coming onto the county, they are, they're expecting to see something on mobile, and they're like, what? I still have to do that on paper? I was doing that, and so that is my goal. My goal as the deputy chief, and working with other departments. Unfortunately, we're not centralized, and I know under the auditor controller, I still have to work and collaborate closely with the director of IT for the county, to really sort of partner and ensure that, we're, whatever project I'm implementing, and, that impacts the county, that we're all on the same page of what we're trying to achieve at the end of the day. And yes, there are higher expectations, especially when, these department heads starts realizing the benefit of the system, and how it actually could remove a lot of these manual business process. Now they're like, can we have this? Can we have this? I'm like, oh, slow down, but as as I said, change management is key to ensure the project success, not just in the beginning, but also at the end.
So you touched on this a little bit earlier, but as you do new projects in the future, how has this experience changed how you approach those initiatives? Are there certain things that are sort of now absolutes that you're putting into any project from the outset?
Yes. So as as I said, I've been in the role for going on 3 years now. We just implemented, or we just brought on our regional medical center into our inventory module of SAP. And for sure, the first thing we did was we had to sit down with our stakeholders and ensure, and educate them of what we're trying to do and how the system will actually help them. And at the end of the day, we also ensure, we request the list of users that will be impacted. And so what we want to, make sure is they are informed way ahead before we even, go live. And so like a little workshop or even a demo that we bring them on board and show them how the system will look. Luckily for us, that now that they've been in SAP, they know the look and feel of the system. The only change for them is really the business process. And so now that we're able to actually have a system within the county, that we actually create a mock-up, environment where we then, demonstrate, or we'll do during the pandemic, we implemented this. We had a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of, training, and just walking them through that this is your old process, this is your new process, and look at where it streamlines, and it allows the users to actually ask the questions before they get introduced. So this implementation with the regional medical center was more successful because not only did we inform them of the impact to their day-to-day work, but also provided a trainer that was actually a county employee that could speak their language too.
So you mentioned, COVID, obviously that's just changed everything in the last year plus. How did that impact kind of how the county operates and how you've dealt with implementation when, how we do our day-to-day business was so suddenly changed?
Yeah, we use a lot more Zoom meetings, and I make it mandatory that when we do the Zoom meetings that we're on, that we turn on our videos, because it's hard, especially when you're educating, when you're doing, a training or a presentation. You want to see still people's face and their reaction, because you could tell like if they're lost, right? And if you're having them follow a process and they're like their eyes are just glazing, then just a regular, Zoom call with no videos, and you think they know what they're getting, if you think they're understanding it, but they're not. And it's about patience too. It's hard to, teach someone on a video conference than actually hands-on. And so we did provide for users that didn't quite get the training on the Zoom call, we continue to work with them until they finally get it. So it wasn't like one and done.
So you would come back and do more follow-up than you might have in the
Correct.
before times, as we call it.
Yes, that is correct. Yes. And so and they truly appreciate it. At the end of the day, we provide, or we ask for a survey of all our trainings, and just so we know where we can improve upon and where did we miss out. And so we get a lot of good feedback saying, hey, one of the best things that they felt this time around compared to when we went live with SAP is this, that our trainer was very knowledgeable in the county process, not just the system.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Before we open the floor for questions, I wanted to throw it back to Tom real quick to ask the same question to him, somewhat of a leading question. How did COVID change the Dayforce project and specifically training and some of the other work that was done?
For both our projects, COVID hit pretty much when we were in a significant milestone area. So in Dayforce, it hit us while we were in user acceptance testing. And part of those speaking tours that I had gone out and tried to convince people that this project was going to be different than the last ones, I also recruited and asked them to be part of the project. And so I had gone from 70 different people to help me test out 10 different bargaining units in my project team, to just basically 4 of us were left standing. The city wasn't set up to do remote for most of those workers. I, being in a more technical position, had remote, but most of them weren't. So we were scrambling to set up remote for our folks. Get them used to the idea of going to webinars. If there was ever a catchphrase in 2020, it was I was on mute. But it was just a challenge to get our project back ramped up and getting used to working remotely while they were still trying to work remotely in a 38-year-old legacy system that still relied on paper. And then, the advantage of giving them some upfront views of the system, though, was when we came time for training later. They were more familiar with the screens. We didn't, the navigation. And so we had less of an adoption curve going from those same black and green screens where it looked like it was 1982 to, going to a website that you could access from home without having to be in the city network. And then using a browser basically to do your job. And so that helped us with our adoption curve, actually by involving people early. But then we also had to completely throw out our training plan. No hands-on training available, in person. It was, prohibited, so we went with online 100% remote learning. We leveraged tools just like the County of San Bernardino, where we leveraged we use WebEx, so our partners use Zoom. So we had instructor-led webinars. We leveraged the internal tools within the products for guided practice sessions, guided demos, help and job aids right in the customized to our processes right in the application, so that we could get that reinforcement. And we had to do a lot of follow-up as well. And so I think those are really the ways that we had to really pivot. So if, one of the things is we had to preach, patience and persistence with everybody.
Great, thank you. Vanessa, I wanted to throw it back to you to see if we've had any questions from our audience.
Hi, yes, we did. All right, so this one says, Rowena, can you describe how the county's SAP Center of Excellence pairs technical and functional users to the benefit of the county, and any suggestions for organizations seeking to unite business owners and IT for success?
Well, luckily for me, I was, again, coming from the private industry, when I was at Disney, the functional team was part under the controller, while the technical team, like your, Avaap developer, basis guys, were under the IT team. Luckily for the County of San Bernardino, when I was brought to the county to create this internal team, I have both the technical and the functional reporting to me. So it is easier because, as I said, we partner well with, when something's wrong with our SAP system, we have the basis guys and the developers next to us, and they all report, they work and report to me. So I think that's such a key for me, and it makes my life easier supporting SAP for the County of San Bernardino, because both the technical team and the functional team works closely, or are actually one umbrella. The other good things is a lot of my functional team members that are part of my team were actually employees of the county. They were brought on board as part of the project. They were brought on board to bring, to support or to provide their business expertise and business process and county process into the team, while there were consultants that are, partners that actually provide them knowledge. And the only team members that actually are not part of the county when I brought them on board were all my technical. So the technical team was outside that already have those SAP knowledge. And one good thing about the functional piece of it is that going forward, when I actually implement brand new modules within SAP and we rely on outside resources, I make it mandatory that they actually sit down with my team members and provide them knowledge transfer. Because at the end of the day, we don't make them come in, do their work, and then leave, because we need to retain knowledge within the team for my team to be successful. I hope that answers that question.
Great, thank you so much. Looks like another question came in. I think this is for both of you. How have you been able to get leadership buy-in to change management, and how do you navigate pushback if you get it?
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, thank you. There's a kind of a lawyer, one of the people that go around and sue folks for injuries or things like that, and he's got a slogan. He says, like, "I don't get paid unless you get paid." And I kind of co-opted that in the sense that this isn't going to work, unless the people that we rely upon, if they understand what we're doing and changing. So the more we depend on them, the more we're going to need to make sure that to be successful, they have to be in the loop, right? And so having the metrics, having a plan, having a measurable way to see how you're going, it makes it more tangible for the sponsors to understand that it isn't just we're going to send out emails to everybody or post something on the intranet, and everybody's going to be informed, right? It is an omni-channel approach that we have a messaging. These are the things we're messaging, and and these are the things that we think and we're hearing that are resonating with people. So we want to make sure we highlight. Our old system wouldn't let people do more than one direct deposit account, right? So the first question I got when I did employee kind of sessions was, will I be able to have more than one direct deposit account? And when I said yes, people were really happy, right? So I made sure every message that went out, every poster that went up, everything that said that is you'll be able to have up to 5. The system could take 10, but I started somewhere, right?
For me, as I said earlier, the county had a really hard time after the system went live because of poor change management. And so it went all the way up to the executives. It went all the way up to the CEO saying that, we're not getting our vendors paid. And I'm like, that's not good. And so they're fully aware of how important change management is now, because they knew that a lot of the complaints that came from end users were, they weren't trained and they weren't part of the process in the beginning. So luckily, as they understood going forward, when we have big implementation, big changes, and we're going to go through a big implementation or change in a couple of years, we're actually have to migrate from our current system that we implemented in 2017 to a more complex and more robust SAP system. And, we have to be there in 2027. And so they're aware that change management now is important for us to be successful.
Great, thank you both. This next question says, what techniques have you used to manage employee resistance to change?
Tom, I could answer that. The thing is, when we talk about patience, not everyone is going to accept it. But the more, to me, the more we get the users that actually truly, see the impact on their day-to-day work, and we constantly work with them and getting them as our first line of support, of defense in a way, is key for our success for the Center of Excellence. The only thing that we do is continue to communicate the before and after, so they could see the impact to their day-to-day lives if they choose. I mean, there's one that we actually documented where if they decided to keep their paper process, it takes 92 days to get a vendor paid. If they actually follow the system process for SAP, it takes less than 2 weeks to get the vendor paid. And so that is a big deal, and it really is the manager's responsibility to also see the benefit to their, their end users if, if they follow the process. But the managers also have to see the benefit before they can actually communicate that. They cannot say, yes, the system doesn't work the way we wanted it to work. But that's how I would look at it.
I agree. Telling people the why behind it, or the instead of just saying, well, this is the way you're going to do it and do it. More people want to know, what's in it for me, what's going to happen, what efficiencies are going to be gained, is this going to be easier or harder? Sometimes it looks like it's harder because they used to just be able to, scribble something down and send it, and somebody else did the voodoo that they do. And it happened, 90 days later, right? But showing that we can increase these types of things or improve the timelines, making sure that that you're building the trust. One of the union reps asked me in one of the systems, how's the system going to screw over the employee? That was the actual question, right? And having to tell them that examples that I had learned during the product evaluations about how an amusement company that was doing that most of their people were able to do without any training, do the onboarding or any kind of video, and they had actually completed most of the onboarding paperwork before they got any kind of contact with anybody to check in with them. That mobile app would be there. And one of the things in our adoption metrics we looked at was how quickly would mobile be adopted, how many people were logging in, and we were seeing about 40% of our employees were logging in on a weekly basis. And a third of those were all coming from mobile. And we knew mobile was going to be somewhat of a underpinning of it, but there's a lot of our employees that their only access to the internet is through the smartphone. We have refuse truck drivers; they don't have a city a network account or login or anything like that, and they're accessing and they're getting the information they need through mobile in the smartphone. So really just letting people know that we're not trying to do anything to hurt anybody. There are benefits that are going to be accruing here. Being realistic, there are going to be bumps in the road. Even as we communicate and everything and kept a change management log, there are things that come up that we didn't think would be an issue that people will raise or that people don't understand. And then having a process though in which you can take that back in and then respond to it and then get it back out helps you be more effective.
Great, thanks again. All right, looks like we just have one last question, but if anyone does have any more, feel free to send it in. We just have a few minutes left. So for this last question, I think you both have really touched on this the entire time, but if you could, what do you feel is the #1 biggest benefit you have both seen using change management in the public sector?
For me, in regards to, again, the newest implementation is my end users are happy to the point where they want more change now. It's weird. It's interesting. I mean, again, when I first got on board and I met with associate, CFO of Regional Medical Center, the first thing he says, "You're breaking my hospital." I'm like, "Oh, I don't get paid enough for that." But I'm like, I'm here, hopefully to fix it. And now he's one of my proponent. I mean, he is one person that can actually go to the head of the hospital and say, we need to start utilizing the system more because we see a lot of the benefits. So that's what the impact is, as the users get to understand that we're trying to help their day-to-day activity and make it more efficient so they could do other things than just keying in something in the system. You're gonna have that's the positive benefit that we get. The more changes we have and the more successful impact to the end users, the more they want change.
I think through the course of my projects, it's gave us feedback. I have a coworker who says feedback's a gift, right? So when you're getting that more immediate and you're able to respond into it, it takes things that are maybe just a splinter and turning, and keep them from affecting the whole body, right? Where you can stave off the rumors about layoffs and everybody's going to be lose their job after this. People would come say, well, if the system automates these things, what am I going to do? And I was like, there's going to be plenty for you to do, right? And it's just going to be a little bit different. We had textbook change resistors where they wanted to take exactly what happened in that 38-year-old system and try to shove it into a modern system that, and that old system was based on mainframe concepts, built on batch processes, built on, people would enter things in, during the day, and they'd get a paper report the next day that would tell them all the things they entered in wrong. And where they would get this immediate feedback, and you would get warnings, or you'd have less chance to make a mistake because you had drop downs to choose from and things like that. So we really just used it as a tool, right? You want to have, as a project manager, as a leader of the system and the solution, you want to have something in your tool belt where you can react to what's happening, and then even be proactive and plan ahead so that you're not having to always react.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, it looks like those were all the questions, and we are to the end of our session. So I just want to thank you both so much, and thank you, Michael, for facilitating. This has been a great session, and want to remind everyone that you will receive the recording. So feel free to share that with your colleagues who might find this interesting as well.
Yes, thank you both. Greatly appreciate your time and insights today.
Thank you.
For inviting me.
All right,
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.